guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. How are we all? Oh my god guys, this video has been a video that I've been waiting to film for 2.5 years, and it is the story of me driving and like my driving tips, how I passed, why it's taken me 2.5 years to pass my driving test. I've not even kept you guys updated on my Instagram because I obviously announced that I got this car, which I was 18 when I got this car, and I told you guys I was doing lessons. And that's all. Like, I've not had any more, like, I've not told you guys anything else because I've just been really embarrassed, honestly, that it's taken me this long. So yeah, I've not updated you guys at all. So I feel like we need a catch up. We need a little girly chat, and we're doing it in my car called Girly. So yeah, this is her name. Her name is Girly. She's always been called Girly since I got her when I was 18. I feel like it's finally time that I like give you guys the full story. Why it's taken me 2.5 years, and you know, 3 tests, 4 theories, and I'm finally passed. But we're gonna just run through the whole story, so let's get on with it. Sorry about the lighting guys, it's really weird weather today. Okay, so I started driving when I was I 17? Yeah, I think in the UK you start driving when you turn 17. So yeah, I got in touch with Red Driving School. Me and Grace are both learning to drive, so we just thought, you know, it would like make a lot of sense if we got in touch with Red Driving School and they could give us, kind of do like a job for them. We promote the driving lessons, they give us instructors, whatever. So I started learning when I was 17. I think I was doing about 1 lesson a week, and with a lesson it's 2 hours long. So I had done like so many lessons. My driver instructor is called Julie. If you guys use Red Driving School, you can request her. She is amazing. She's the sweetest woman. Like, we actually became really good friends at the end of it. So then for my 18th birthday, I got Girly, which is my car. I got her, I got my pink Mini Cooper, and it was the best day of my life. I opened up a keyring and it was my car, and it was the best day of my life. I know how lucky I am that my dad bought me a car. Like, I literally couldn't believe it. But this was the motivation for me learning to drive, because when I turned 18, that is when COVID happened. We went into a massive lockdown. I basically stopped doing driving lessons, I think for like a year or like 8 months because of COVID. You know, everyone was in lockdown, so I basically stopped learning to drive. At this point, I'm also trying to do my theory. If you guys don't know, you have to pass a theory test before you can book your driving test. It took me 3 times to pass my theory. The first time, I think I missed by 1 mark. The second time, I missed by like 10 marks, and then I passed my 3rd time. And that was just like the biggest relief once I had passed my theory. Oh my god, it was like, I just felt like so stupid that I couldn't get my theory. So once I passed it on the 3rd time, it was the biggest blessing. I was so happy and ready to take my driving test. So then obviously COVID, you know, stopped, and I go back to my driving lessons, and I booked a test. My first test was 2021. I can't remember what month it was. I think it was around like September 2021. I was like, okay, I'm ready. I've got my driving test. At this point, I had been learning to drive, I think, for about a year. So I was like, okay, like, come on, bitch, I'm ready. So I took my driving test and failed. I failed, actually not that bad. It was really bad weather on my driving test. It was chucking it down with rain, and I'm not saying that was the reason I failed, but I actually am, because it just like, it made the, like, driving in the rain is so much harder than driving in like normal conditions. So yeah, I basically just flunked it. The actual reason I failed was because on a country road there was a car coming towards me, and instead of stopping, I went like 8 miles an hour when I should have just stopped. And I also went way too fast on country road bends, so I failed my driving test. When I tell you, I thought that was the end of the world for me. Like, I literally remember thinking like, this is it. Like, I cried for days, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I was so upset that I failed my driving test, because I was learning for like a 1.5 years, and the other massive guilt was that I had this car. This is like why I think I had such a breakdown learning to drive was because every single time I failed, I was like, I have a car, and I've like let everyone down because my dad bought me this car and I can't even drive it, and it's just been in our driveway for a year, and I just felt so guilty. Like at this point I'd had girly for like nearly a year and I still couldn't drive. Anyway, so that was my first driving test. Then I started my gap year. I went to Paris for a month. Guys, my neighbours are literally out and I want to shoot myself. Yeah, so then I started my gap year. So I went to Paris, I went to Milan, and I managed to get a test for, I think it was February of 2022 was my next test. And also I used an app called Driving Test Cancellations to get all these tests, by the way, because there is like an 8-month wait for tests in my area. So yeah, I had to like really try and find it. I ended up doing a second test earlier this year. I literally, because I was in Milan for a month and then I was going to come home. I think I had like 2 weeks of lessons and then it was my driving test, and I would literally have like panic attacks in Milan. I literally couldn't, like the last week of Milan I would just like cry randomly. Also, I didn't tell anyone when I had my test. The only person that knew was my mum and Julie. No one else knew when I had my test. Not Grace, not my dad, not my sister. So yeah, I was just like crying, and I was really, really nervous for my second test because at this point it had been like a year and a half, maybe even 2 years. I think it'd been 2 years at this point that I'd started to learn. I've probably done over like, I don't even want to think about how many lessons I've done, because Red Driving School stopped paying for them after like 6 months or something. So I don't even want to think about how many lessons I've had. I've probably had like 500 lessons. That's not even me being dramatic because of COVID. I had my second driving test. I came home from Milan. I did like 2 weeks of driving lessons, and then I had my driving test, and it went terribly. Like I failed worse than I did the first time. I failed because I went too slow on country lanes. Like that was actually the reasoning, but I knew I'd failed in the first 5 minutes of my test. I was so nervous. Like the second time I was so nervous. I got a nosebleed the day before out of nerves. Like I don't get nosebleeds, and I was so nervous that I forgot to do like, you know, that. And I knew I failed in the first 5 minutes, but it's like a 40-minute test. You just have to kind of keep calm and carry on. But I didn't keep calm. I just failed like so miserably. The first time I did a driving test, because you always get a manoeuvre. The first time I got parallel park, I actually smashed it. Second time I got front bay park, which should be the easiest because literally all you're doing is, and I failed on my manoeuvre. I knew I wasn't in the lines. I knew I'd failed the first 5 minutes of my test, so it kind of just felt like, what is the point? Like I know I failed, and then because I knew I failed, I was just having like an actual meltdown. It was just like the worst thing of my life was the second test. And what made it even worse, you guys, is at this point it had been 2 years since I took my theory. If you guys don't know, when you take your theory, you have 2 years to pass your driving test, and if you don't do it in those 2 years, your theory becomes invalid and you have to retake it. So what had happened was, it had been 2 years since I'd done my theory, so it was either I pass this second test, or if I fail my second test, my theory becomes invalid and now I have to redo my theory as well as redoing my driving test. Can you get over that pressure? So in my second test, I failed miserably. I remember thinking, I was going off on my gap year, I need to know how to drive. So I remember thinking, I told him, I was like, I am going off on a gap year, so I really need to drive. And I thought that was gonna like convince him to like pass me. Obviously it didn't. So yeah, I failed. And the most awkward thing, guys, is when you fail your driving test, no matter if you fail or pass, your driving instructor has to drive you home. Poor Julie, girl, because I was in the car sobbing my eyes out because I had to redo my theory, and it had taken me 3 times to do my theory. I was just sobbing. Like I was literally like thing. I was like, Julie, I've now got to redo my theory, and it took me 3 times. I just don't know if I can do this anymore. I feel like no one really talks about like the mental toll it took on me, and it really did. Like, I was really upset, and I was just really depressed, to be honest. Like, these 2 years, like, if you ask me what's the one thing that makes you like cry at night or keeps you up at night, it'd be my driving. I've had so many dreams of when I've gone to bed, and I've like had this dream of someone taking my driving test for me and passing it. Like, think about, like, there's one thing in your life you've been trying to do for 2.5 years and you just can't do it. Like, it's the most infuriating thing. So I failed my second test. I actually went to a bottomless brunch the same day, and I told Grace I'd failed my driving test because we were at the bottomless brunch together, and I just got really drunk. That was in February. So February, I'm like, okay, I need to redo my theory. I can't even book a driving test unless I do my theory. Like, that's how deep it is. So my mum was away on holiday, and I booked my theory, told my mum, but it was actually kind of better for me that my mum wasn't there. With peace and love to my mum, it kind of just took away the pressure. So I went and I passed my theory. Hallelujah, I passed my theory, and I booked my driving test. So my driving test was on the 6th of October. I think I did my theory in like February, March, and I could get a test for October. Like, that's how, and that was on a driving test cancellation app. That is how far like the gap is of like trying to get a fucking test. I managed to get a test for October. So I text Julie, and there was no point me starting lessons in February, March if I had a test in October. I'd have 3 lessons before my test. So this whole year I've just been going out with my dad a shit ton. Bless that man's heart, because he just has to take me, like, he goes to works like a 9 to 5 or like a 6 to 5, and then he has to drive me around. Well, I have to drive him around. That poor man, like, I know he's hated it, but he hasn't complained once because he's a saviour and he's the best man. So I was just doing like learning in girly with my dad, and then I began lessons with Julie again. Like, I love Julie so much, but it's such a love-hate, because I know every single time I see her I've got a test coming up. So like, she would pull into my drive and I'd just be like, fuck, I don't want to do it. I knew I had 3 lessons before my test. I had 2 hours, 2 hours, and then a 3-hour lesson. But yeah, I basically just like had these lessons, and then it came out to my driving test. I was actually a lot more chilled on this driving test, which is probably why I did pass. The reason I was more chilled is because I was just like, whatever happens, happens. Like, I thought my life was over when I failed all those other times before, and I'm still here. So, you know, nothing's gonna happen if I fail. Like, yes, it's a fat L, but I'm not gonna die. Like, get a grip. So yeah, that was just like my mentality. I was just like, girl, get a grip. Like, I'm not gonna die if I fail. I was still like, the morning of my test, I couldn't eat, I didn't sleep the night before. I was up at 5 AM, I was sick. Like, obviously I was still fucking nervous. So she picked me up. Before your driving test, you'll usually have like a 40-minute lesson. So I had like a 40-minute lesson, and then she drove me to the test centre, and I was just like, I don't want to go here again. I knew like this was going to be a make or break. You know, I told myself that if I failed this driving test, I was going to consider quitting driving lessons, and I was actually going to consider taking my driving test in my Mini, because it was costing me so much money to obviously have an instructor and do all that. So, and also like, it was taking such a mental toll on me that I kind of said to my mum, I was like, I don't know if I can do a 4th test. Like, it's just like so mentally draining, and like, I just like feel so depressed and anxious. I don't know if I can physically or mentally do a 4th test. It was a massive like make or break, to be honest. As well as this, my driver instructor told me that the next available tests were in March. Had a good vibe to it, this test. Like, me and my driver instructor were kind of just like laughing about it, and that's how you know there's a good vibe. Also, my driving, the man that was doing my test was late. My driving test was at 10:04, and he didn't come out until about 10:10, which means my driving test was less than 40 minutes. It was about half an hour. that just gave me good vibes. This is another thing, guys. So you can request if you want your driving instructor in the car. So that means they sit in the back, they can't say anything, they can't do anything, but you can have them there. The first 2 times I did my test, didn't want Julie in the back. I couldn't because of COVID for the second one, but the first one I was like, no, that's too off-putting. My third one, I was like, I mean, nothing's been working, let's just have her in the car. Guys, it made the biggest difference having Julie in the car. It put me so much at ease because I know her, and every time I would like second guess myself, I would look at her in my review mirror and I'd just be like, what would Julie do? And it just calmed me down so much, I can't even begin to tell you. So I would highly recommend having your driving instructor in the car with you if that's an option, which it will be now because of COVID. But it also made me like want to drive my best because I knew Julie was in the back. So if you do fail, then they know why you failed, and that's so much better because then they can actually help you improve. The worst part of your driving test is at the end. It's the most exciting but also the most nerve-wracking because you're thinking like, this could be it, like I could pass my driving test. So at the end they usually say like, how do you think that went? Or they'll just say, okay, so unfortunately we have failed you, and that's when I start crying. Or for him, this man, he went, you passed. And I was like, I started crying obviously because I'm dramatic. I just started bawling actually. I didn't even start crying, I started bawling my eyes out. Which I think is fair enough. It's been 2.5 years of like shit. He actually said he passed me on a benefit of the doubt because there was a time I should have gone right. Like I should have just gone, but instead I waited for some other cars, and he said that was wrong. But that's fine, you know, he still passed me. I did a parallel park and an emergency stop. So parallel parks are my shit. Like I've always passed in a parallel park. I'm good at them. Yes, I passed on my third time lucky. Do you know what, there's something about 3s. Like 3 is now my lucky number because I passed on my third theory on my third test. I passed on Thursday and it is now Monday. I still, fun fact, haven't driven my car because I'm not insured yet. My dad has to get me a black box. So I actually haven't driven my car yet, which is kind of depressing. Like obviously I've driven it with my dad, but I mean I haven't driven it on my own yet because he's not passed. Yeah, I've not got insurance. I'm gonna give you guys some like top tips and like what I think really did help me. Obviously you don't have to listen, like you don't have to care, but I'm gonna give you them anyway because I love to give unsolicited information. My number 1 would be get a driving instructor that you actually like as a person, because you will spend so much time with them. Me and Julie, we actually formed like such a friendship, and I think that's so important. Like, don't have a driver instructor that you don't like because it will give you even more anxiety. Like if I didn't like Julie, the amount of like anxiety I would have to like get in that car every fucking week, even though I really didn't want to, would be so high. But I actually really liked her, so I didn't really mind because I liked seeing Julie. Like you don't have to be their best friend, but you have to like them. You have to like trust them, and you have to like how they teach. Like I couldn't deal with a driver instructor that was like yelling at me, for instance. I couldn't have that. So that wouldn't have worked if Judy was like that. I would have switched, but she was great for me. But like my sisters had people that had like yell at her and stuff like that. Like I can't deal with that. That is not the way I like to learn. So yeah, get a driving instructor that fits you. My second tip would definitely be, like this was my biggest thing that I think helped me. There were some roundabouts that really did give me a lot of anxiety, a lot of panics. And what I did, because I'm so smart, is I went on Google Maps and I Google Maps'd the roundabout. I looked it up on Google Maps, and then you know like when you can drop that little person so it's like you're on the road, I did that. And then I pretended in my head, I was like, okay, so if the instructor says take the second exit, and then I would do the, like I would press the Google Maps so it would go round the roundabout, and I would pretend I'm a car so I could see what my exits are, where I need to, like there's like a spiral roundabout, and I wanted to see like when I have to go left and when I have to get off the roundabout. That was my biggest lifesaver. That made me so much more confident with these huge roundabouts because I actually knew where I was going. I mean, you're not going to be able to sleep the night before the driving test, no matter like have a good night's sleep. No, you're not going to be able to. I tried to go to sleep about 11:30. I couldn't sleep till about 2, and then I wake up about 5 AM. Like you will not sleep the day before the driving test. It's just not going to happen. And you will not be able to eat anything the day of your driving test. I don't care what people say. They say have a good breakfast. No. There is no doubt in my mind that the worst time of your life will be the night before your driving test. There's just no doubt. Like, there's no point me trying to bullshit you guys. But persevere. persevere with your driving. I mean, I've been doing this for 2.5 years. I started driving when I was 17. I'm 20 this year. I so easily could have given up and just been like, fuck this, I obviously can't drive. But I had so much belief in myself, like I am a good driver, like I know I'm a good driver. What always let me down was my nerves. I would just have like panic attacks, and then I would do stupid things that I would never usually do. You can do it, like you are a good driver, otherwise your driving instructor wouldn't suggest for you to book a test unless you could drive. And if I didn't have this car, I probably would have given up driving like a year ago. But because I had this car, I was like, I can't give up because I have a car. Like, my dad has bought me a car. I'm not just gonna say, no, you can sell it, because this car is my dream car. Like, I am so in love with this car, so no way was I just gonna give up. Like, my biggest dream in life was to drive this car, and I've done it. I've done it. Don't give up, because once you've got that driving license, you have it for the rest of your life. You have it for the rest of your life. You will need to drive at some point. Like, you might be like a 40-year-old mum, you need to be driving your kids around, girl. So then you're going to have to learn when you're 40, and it's so much easier. It's actually scientifically proven to be easier to learn to drive when you're younger than when you're older. And another thing I had to remind myself is that you drive the car doesn't control you. That is something I had to remember on my 3rd test, because I just felt like no matter what I was doing, I was just going to fail, and it was just like, but then I just took a step back and I was like, I create my own destiny. Like, I am driving this car, it's not driving me. Like, I am in control of what happens on that day. Like, if I pass, if I fail, I'm in control of that, no one else. So yeah, just have belief in yourself, guys. And if anyone can show you that you can do it, it's me. It's me. 4 theories, 3 tests, 2.5 years. I think it's me that can prove that you guys can do it. If you guys have a driving test coming up, I wish you the best of luck. No one will understand how stressful it is apart from you, and I don't think anyone understands, like, when I passed, the sheer amount of like relief I felt, and just like I just felt like 2.5 years of guilt was just let off. Like, guilt that I had a car I couldn't drive, guilt that like I'd spent so much money on driving lessons and tests and I just couldn't get it. Like, all of that guilt just went away, and I've never felt happier in my whole life than when I've passed my driving test. It's just the biggest amount of relief. And I know for some people that's like, girl, literally calm down, it's just a driving test. For me, it was just it was just the longest thing in the world and just the worst thing in the world, but now it's the best. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm really sorry, I actually didn't mean for this to even be a video about this. This was meant to be a car tour. That's so awkward. It just turned out to be a really long video. But I am going to film, my next video is going to be a car tour, which, yes, I've had this car since I was 18. So I've had it for a 1.5 years. But I've never wanted to give a car tour because I didn't feel like it was mine until I passed my test. My next video is going to be a car tour, which I'm ecstatic to give you guys because this car is just my dream car and I just want to give you guys a whole tour of it. And then my video after that will be a come drive with me once I feel more confident driving. I'm just so excited for the future, and thank you guys for watching this video, and I love you guys so much. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.